if I stand here anywhere, like I'm totally blinded, and then if I go over here, you see the camera in the ceiling? It's like all you can see is the projector and my knee. So it's not, yeah. You can stand either side. Okay, it's like we're experiencing attrition in here. There's a lot of empty seats in the back. Okay, so we've got a super full schedule today, so I'm going to start like already. And I'm holding the microphone awkwardly because I want to introduce to you Raven, who is a veteran of 361, and she's here to talk about some resources that are available to you at the ARC.
Okay, guys, so my name is Raven. I am a third-year ITM student here at IIT. I am from the ARC, so I'm a tutor. The Academic Resource Center, in case y'all didn't know. It's in Herman Hall, which is that way. Basically, we have tutors for all of your needs. I feel like all you guys are probably ITM, so you probably don't need help with like math or biology or chemie or mechie, but just in case you did, we have all of those and more. So you should come and like have fun. So the hours are from Monday through Thursday, 10 to 8 p.m., Friday, 10 to 3 p.m., and then Sunday, 6 to 9. I am only there Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. If Sally would permit me, I will write the hours on the board. I do everything like ITM 311, 411, 311, 312, 412, 361, 362, 421, CS 115, 116, 201, all that fun stuff. Coding, pretty much. Yeah, I'll write my hours on the board, and it's pretty much just like to help you guys. In addition to, you know, Sally's office hours, your TA, who you're getting's office hours, there's just more help. So, yeah.
Thank you, Raven. Yeah, you can write your stuff on the board. Seek help, okay? The distinction between students who do really well in classes and the ones who don't are the ones who get help when they need it, period. I've seen incredibly bright, motivated, smart students absolutely fail because they won't ask for help. And in fact, some ways it's the more students who think that they're really bright who end up struggling because they don't know, because they never learned how to ask for help. So ask for help, okay? Oh, so we'll leave a stack of these, or do we want to pass them out, or we can just leave them up here? You can grab one as you leave. It's the ARC little flyer thing. All right. So speaking of, while Raven finishes writing her hours on the board, speaking of asking for help, this has been a quiet group so far. There's a few of you who have messaged me in one form or the other. Is everybody clear on how to get a hold of me? Okay. We all know that you can go into Basecamp, right? And I've just posted this afternoon that there are apps available for Basecamp. So if you're irritated because you're getting, and of course I'm not logged in. If you're irritated that you're getting emails every time somebody posts something, there's a way to manage that. Best way is to get one of the Basecamp apps either on your phone or your tablet. Oh man, come on, really? What's that? I could be a bot. Let's just Turing test my way through this right now. Okay, now of course we wait for the verification code to come in. Yay! Okay. I don't even know what that is. I got put on it. I don't know what breakfast sweetie treats is, and I've been curious every time I log into that screen, and then I'm afraid to click on it because I don't know. Okay. So obviously here's our class. Here's pings. I've got one outstanding. I won't click on that, so below the cover of whoever has pinged me, but you can ping me. That's a good way to do it. Last night, who was it? Somebody pinged me it doesn't matter who. Somebody pinged me last night at like 6:30, and I didn't respond until almost 9 o'clock. That's because I was in class teaching pretty much the only reason that I won't write back right away. Okay? So take advantage of those apps and things so that you can stay on top of what's happening. Like, don't just shut all your notifications off, because then you'll never know what happens, especially if I'm, like, sick or something. I will post to Basecamp and say, hey, I'm sick, I'm not coming in, or I have a family emergency, or I'm at the dog with the at the vet with the dog, or something like that. Okay? All right. Wonderful. I'll stick that over here. Okay, so that's our, we are getting a TA in here. That's being worked out right now. What's that? Ooh, I know. I'm excited. And hopefully if it's the person I think it is, he's had many classes with me, so he can really shepherd you through. So that'll be good. All right, so first production problem is up. Okay, and the production problem repository is here. Let me get my mood lighting set up here so this isn't quite so washed out. All right, so I'm actually going to walk you through the very first production problem. And what the first problem is to learn how to fork, clone, and commit to somebody else's repository. Okay? So all of this is detailed verbatim, but basically you need to go to this particular URL to fork the repository. I'm going to hop into my other GitHub account so I can actually do this. Let's see. All right. Okay, so you will go into this repository as somebody. Oh, of course, I'm not signed. How am I not signed in here? It's the day of not being signed in. And of course, you're going to have to wait while I get another verification code, probably. Oh, no, that one let me in. Okay. All right, so this is my Carl Stally account, which is where I do most of my actual professional other work. Prof Stally is where I put all stuff for classes. So when I'm in here, as you will be, there's this fork button in the upper right-hand corner. So then you click fork so that you get your own copy. And of course, my life is very complicated, so it's like, where do you want to fork it? You shouldn't have to make such decisions. Then it'll tell you it is forking, profstally/ITMD 361 PP 2017. Okay? All right, so now I have forked this repository from myself. Okay, so I'm in my Carl Stally account. There's my URL for this repository. I've forked it from profstally/ITMD 361. Okay, just like that. All right, and if you continue, again, this is all written out verbatim, and you can confirm that you've done this correctly if you go to this other URL, which is the network members. There we are. Oh, look at all these go-getters. Okay, so a bunch of you have already forked this thing, which is fantastic. Okay, so once you've forked this, you should see your name listed here. Okay? All right. Grace was the first one to, I told you I was going to give you the shout out. You're the first one. Like last night, I'm like, I just done this, and like, boom, somebody had forked it. It was great. Okay, so you'll see your name listed there. And then, so you've done two things here. You've started with my copy of this repository from Prof Stally, and on GitHub, you forked it. Now it's in your own account, in this case, my Carl Stally account. Okay, that is the most we'll ever probably do on GitHub. Everything else is just done through Git itself. So the next thing we need to do, so this is up in the cloud. Ooh. Okay. So from there, we need to actually clone this thing to your local computer, which I will do by this little sloppy laptop there. Okay, so we got to clone this thing. So once you've cloned this repository, and again, I know I'm going fast, everything of this is written down very directly for you. Okay, so there's a clone or download button, and I'm going to say here in this tiny little box that pops up, okay, I'm going to clone with SSH. I think somewhere, let's see how smart I am, or how dumb. Yes, I gave you instructions in here of how to set up SSH keys with GitHub so you can push and pull and clone from to and from GitHub using SSH like a grown-up instead of HTTPS like a kindergartner. Okay, it's a harsh judgment, but I'm making it. Okay, learn to set up SSH keys. So that documentation is in the actual problem itself. All right, so I copy this. I go to my projects directory where I've been doing all my work, and then I can do git clone and then just paste in that URL. In this case for me, it's git at github.com:Carl. You'll have colon whatever your username is. All right. Then you hit return, and then boom, it takes a second, and now inside of your projects directory, mine's crazy. Oh, that's right. I registered a site called Carl Says WTF. I forgot about that. It was a wild summer. Okay, so, oh yeah, that's my other web drive. Yeah, so there's that. So what am I going into? ITMD, 361, PowerPoint. Okay, PP, not PowerPoint, production problem. All right, and then this is where you can actually do the problem. And if you go into here, actually, you can just open up Atom on this directory. Okay, and so every week I'll keep adding these production problems. All right, so it tells you to, down here on step 3, to paste in the URL to your copy of the productions problem URL. Okay, so I can do that. Just go back here, grab this thing, and paste it in. And then, of course, when I go back to my command line, now that I've changed that file, I can run git diff, and I'll see there I've pasted in my copy of the repository as you were supposed to do, all right? And I'll make a commit, as the instructions will tell you to do. Let's see. What is it called? README. Okay. And add URL to my fork of the production problems. Okay? All right, so we do that. You'll continue reading the instructions where it will tell you that you can now push this back up to GitHub, okay, from your computer. So now I say git push origin master. We're going to walk through remotes again in a second. So if this is alien abduction territory, don't worry, okay? So I've pushed up to my account. Now if I go and look here at my fork, all right, there's my latest commit, which is add URL to my fork of the production problem. So you will do exactly this. This is the basic, so you get really awesome and you find a bug in jQuery or something like that. This is the same procedure. You fork a copy to your own account, you clone it, you do your work, you push it back up, and then the next step is to do a pull request into them. We're not going to cover that particular part of it. But so this is, again, a professionalization technique versus uploading stuff to Blackboard or something like that you'll never do professionally, right? I hope. Don't work anywhere they'll make you use Blackboard. Which, if I followed my advice, I'd go home. Except they don't make me use Blackboard. They urge me to, but I refuse. Okay. All right, so the last thing that you need to do is that you'll add a second remote to your repository. So if you run the git remote v command, once you've cloned this, you'll see two things called origin. And origin is just a shorthand for the remote repository so that we can push new work up to it. We can pull down work that we don't have on our local computer. By convention, that remote is nicknamed origin, okay? So I'm going to add another one here. I'm going to git add remote, and I'm going to call this one, what did I call it? I think instructor is what I called it in the instructions. Let's see. Git remote add instructor, and then you can add in, and if you like, you can even do the HTTPS one for this. That's what I did in the instructions, so let's do it here. Git remote, or git add, hold on, I've got this wrong. Git remote add instructor, and then I can paste in this URL. All right, and if I do git remote v, now I have two remotes that my repository is aware of. It's aware of my remote on my personal account, and it's aware of the instructor remote over on that one. So when I want to get the latest production problems, I just say git pull instructor master, and right now it'll say everything's already up to date. But if there was a second production problem, you'd get it. See, isn't that elegant? Instead of like, make sure you go here and click to download the zip file, and once you download the zip file, then make sure you put, come on, let's get organized, let's do it like pros, yeah.
You can automate it this way too.
How automated how?
Scripts.
Oh yeah, just write a script, yeah, exactly.
You have something.
And in fact, that's exactly what I will do to all of you, because I will grab all of your remotes, and I'll have them all in one directory on my computer. I've got a shell script that races through git pull origin master on all of those things, so I update the homework, or actually my TA now, I'll teach him how to do that. One fell swoop, go through, pull everybody's work down, right? I mean, what a waste of time to go into something like Blackboard and like, oh, I got to click on this file and see if you did your work. Like, no, just pull a script down. Yep, we love the command line interface for exactly that reason, is that it allows you to script and automate everything, right? You heard that story, like The Verge, I think, picked it up. There's a guy who worked at like, it wasn't Verizon, but it was a company like that, and basically got hired for, I don't know, $160,000 a year or something like that, and basically figured out how to automate his entire job. Oh, no, this was on Reddit. And so there was this whole thread, like, is it ethical for this guy to keep working there if he's figured out how to, like, basically run one shell script once a month to do the job that he's paying for, and the rest of the time he, like, hangs out and plays World of Warcraft or something like that. Okay. That's one of those interesting ethical things. What do you do when you get so good at your job that you can actually eliminate the job for the company? Right? You have to strategically screw things up every once in a while. I'm a big fan of that. What's that? Or you sell it, yeah? Well, except you probably sign over all your intellectual property to them, so. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, doing this stuff clandestinely, and, you know, everybody's like, wow, you do such a great job. And he's like, thanks, I know. I remember that day. Okay, so that'll be your production problem. We'll have a discussion of the production problem next week, and that'll be basically the pattern. So we'll do a production problem one week, and then the next week we'll have a discussion. This one probably not going to be the richest discussion in the world, but we will get to talk about Git remotes and things like that a little bit more. Okay, questions? All right, so why don't we make another remote? Let's look at this from the other end. So I've been writing this demos code, and one of the things I want you to have here, now that we've been in class for almost 2 weeks, is to have access to all the code that I write in class. So I've been creating this nice little repository here on my computer since, what, day 2? Right? Here's all the commits from class. So what I want to do now is actually create a remote repository where you can have access to all this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll go into my GitHub account here, Prof. Sally. And again, you'll hear people say like, oh, wow, I really need to learn GitHub. No, you don't. Like GitHub, you don't do that much with. You do everything through the command line. Keeps you out of trouble. But, and actually there are command line scripts you can do to even do the remote repositories and stuff. GitHub has a rich API. But for the sake of learning, we'll click New Repository here. So I'm going to call this ITMD 361 demos 2017 again. So I'm going to date it. I don't recommend putting dates on things, but just for the sake of my own archives. And so 3 or 4 years from now, when you're feeling wistful, I remember those fond days in 361. How did he handle that CSS grid problem? You could still find the repository from that. So there we go. Classroom code and demos from ITMD 361 fall 2017. Okay. Now, this interface allows you to choose whether to make a repository that's hosted on GitHub, either public or private. You used to have to pay money in order to have private repositories. Now I think they give you some. ITM has its own like Git setup, so that you might get some things like that. But obviously, I want this to be public because I want you all to have it, and anybody else who finds the videos on YouTube or whatever, right? And so I'm going to leave that alone. And then the other thing it says is that you can initialize this repository with a README. Now, The second that you do what I did, if you remember way back last week where I wrote git init, as soon as you run git init on your own copy of the repository, it has been initialized. So we don't want to initialize another one up here. So we'll leave this initialize empty repository with a README. We'll leave that unchecked. Okay? Then we just say create repository, and you'll be met with this rather cumbersome looking set of instructions here. Okay, but basically what it's telling you to do is here's how to go ahead and add a remote to wherever you've got your repository hosted. So I'm going to grab this one. All right, and so what I can do is to say just within my repository here, git remote, add origin. Again, I'm going to go with the conventional, the canonical place where this repository lives. We'll call it origin. Okay, and now I should be able to hit return. However, because I'm a person who uses two different GitHub accounts and I talk to them over SSH, I have this little fiction. Do not do this yourself. Okay, I have this fake resource called github.edu. There is no such thing. It's just part of my SSH configuration file, so I can use two separate keys to talk to GitHub. So you will have github.com, okay? Unless you get crazy like me and decide that having two GitHub accounts is a really good idea. So then I can say git push origin master. And now this code is up here on the web, which of course is nice, but it would be even nicer if you could get this from the course calendar. So let's do that. Pull this down. And Atom, help me out here. All right, so I've got a little hidden link here that I've had commented out since before class started. So all I have to do is uncomment out that line. And let's see, I can't remember if down here in the links. Tools, course resource. Okay, so that demos repo has been in the clear. So now this will actually be, will take you someplace. So I will add. And again, I always do, no matter how confident I am, I always do a git diff before I commit, because you just never know when you sloppily accidentally like hit some keys on your keyboard or something. I want to know exactly what I'm committing. So in this case, very uninteresting commit. You might not even be able to see it. There are two lines that I have deleted, which are specifically these HTML comments. So I will add this, commit, show link to course demo repo. All right. So then I push this two places. I push it up to GitHub, and then I actually push it to my web server. And now if we go back and reload our course website, now you'll have this all code written in class available on GitHub, right at the very top. Okay, so hopefully that's someplace where you can't miss it. And so then when you click on that thing, it will take you to the page where we've done this. You can look at the commit history that I've written. It's actually really fun. I think it's fun, but I have a really low threshold of what I consider fun. But I still like go back and watch the videos later and be like, oh yeah, that's when I wrote that commit. Look, it's on tape. Okay? So you'll have always access to everything that I write in class. Sometimes I'm going to screw up, or something won't work, or I'll just have like a brain problem and I won't remember what it was that I was supposed to write. And then I'll go home and make a fresh commit, and I'll post about it on Basecamp where I solve my problem. Okay? All right. So really all we use GitHub for, so we clone once, or we do init. And then for the rest of the life of your project, you're pushing or you're pulling from the remote on GitHub. So we don't really spend a lot of time hanging out on GitHub and thinking about how awesome GitHub is. It's just a shelf. If you don't want to use GitHub, you can use GitLab. Same basic idea. All right. Any questions about remotes? Okay. Well, then let's get on with the main monkey business. Pick up where we were.
I'm still unsure about GitHub.
Okay. GitHub, don't worry about. Worry about learning Git. Git on your computer is where you're doing your adding you're committing, all that stuff, and then when the workday is done or there's an electrical storm outside and you want to protect your work, then push it up to GitHub so that it's someplace else. So that if a meteor should fall through the ceiling and smash up my laptop, we're good because we've pushed all those commits up to GitHub. All right. Has everybody started using Git yet? Okay, if you haven't yet, make sure you get on that. Obviously, this week, the production problem will force you to do that. And, you know, when I first learned Git, and of course, I am in this weird position of teaching courses unlike I ever had myself personally. I tried a number of times to learn version control, and I was terrible at it until I just decided everything I was writing, I was going to use Git with. So grocery lists in Git, and academic papers in Git, and love letters in Git, whatever it was that I was writing, right? Yeah, private repository for all the love letters, yeah. So do the same for yourself. You're in other classes this semester and they're not requiring you to use Git, okay? You'll thank yourself partially so you don't lose any work, but then that's the way that you learn this kind of style of development, just through sheer repetition of it. Okay. So now that I have every window in the universe open, let's close that. Let's close the production problems. No, I closed everything. Okay. Okay. So this is where we were on Monday. Okay. We had validated this. I linted this thing in like 2 seconds. All right. So where do we go from here? Let's put our 3 magic adjectives on the board. Valid, right? Is this HTML valid? Yes. How do we know? We ran it through a validator. That's the one and only way to know that it's valid. And of course, we went even a step further, and we ran it through a linter. Okay? Well-formed. What does it mean for HTML to be well-formed? What language's laws are you obeying when you can make the pronouncement that HTML is well-formed? XML, okay? What kinds of, and again, this is a stylistic thing. HTML is far more permissive than XML, but we're going to write in XML style because that cuts out a whole lot of independent variables when we're trying to debug layouts and things like that. So what kinds of things do we have to do in order to make sure a document is well-formed? Yes. Yes. Everything, and I can put in parentheses, self closes, right? We have a title tag that opens, the title tag has to close. And we close tags in the opposite order that they're open, right? What you might know from a systems class as first in, last out, right? Head opens, title then closes, meta opens and closes, right? This is a self-closing void element. And then finally, when we're done with all of that, then head closes. And of course, when we go way out, HTML is the first tag on the page to open. It's the last one to close, okay? Okay, lowercase. Lowercase everything. Lowercase element names like P and H1 and body. Lowercase attribute names like car set and lang. Okay. So we can talk about lowercase elements and attributes. Okay. The other thing is that we double quote all attribute values. Say that again? Technically you can use single quotes. I prefer double quotes because in the case, like for example, let's say I had an image tag. We haven't seen this before. Image takes a source attribute, so we could call this dog.jpg. This doesn't actually exist, but if it did, we could call it up. And then we have an alt attribute that goes in here. And we could do something like, my dog's so cute. Okay? If we're doing single quote attributes, we would have to escape this thing. It's generally pretty rare to do double quotes inside of an attribute value. It happens, but it tends to be rarer than the apostrophe. Okay? The only thing is to be consistent. If you decide you're going to single quote all your attribute values, then every single attribute value you do should be single quoted. And then we need to check the linter configuration because I think it might be enforcing double quotes. Okay? But I would recommend doing double quotes. You'll never be sad because you did double quotes. Or you'll rarely be sad if you do double quotes. Okay? The other thing, stylistically, right? We've been talking in class for different things that spaces matter, right? Spaces matter in file names. They're significant. Spaces matter on the command line in terms of separating a command line suite from its options. Okay? Don't put spaces around your attribute values. This is permissible. It's really ugly, and it makes it very difficult for you to scan your page. This makes it very clear where this chunk is, and so you can much more quickly read your text if the only places that you're seeing spaces is in between one attribute value and the next attribute. Yes?
Self-closing.
Right. Yeah, that's less well-formed and more like be nice to IE users, right? This little space here, that's for Internet Explorer for its sake. Okay? Double quote attribute values. No space around the equal sign. Okay? Just let those things cinch up so that they're much more readable. I've put this ID, which is the first of two structural/semantic global attributes that we will talk about today, next week, all days. We have these attributes, class and ID. Okay, they obey different rules. This one is what is known as a CSS signature. I tend to do this. Let's see if I actually did this on our course site. I don't think I did. I probably should. Nope, I just did an ID for what page it was. So on our calendar page, the ID is calendar. Okay. You can also do something called a CSS signature, which I think on my... No, didn't put it there either. Guess I've just stopped doing that. It's a good idea, though, to put the domain of wherever you're creating a site, in this case, the example domain, example.com, and then replace the dots with hyphens, just like that. Okay? What a CSS signature like that does. So if I did that for courses.carlsally.com, if there was something I did that irritated you on the course site, you could write your own CSS style using that to override my style. So if you hate my link colors that bad, you could write your own style sheet. Okay. All right. So we'll leave that gone for now. Okay. All right, let's get rid of this image tag. Okay. Those are pretty much the only rules that we have to worry about for well-formed. And then the last one, semantic. Ooh, suddenly I'm writing in black. What do we mean when we talk about semantics? Just generally, not even with HTML, what are semantics? We talk about the semantics of a programming language. What are you referencing?
We say things in different ways.
Okay, say things in different ways. And what do we talk about when we say we're saying things in different ways? What do we change? Thinking of a very specific word. Probably not giving you anything to go on. starts with M, rhymes with meaning.
Meaning.
Meaning, yeah. Right? Let's see what the old dictionary has to say about semantics. Okay. The branch of linguistics and logic concerned with meaning was number of branches. Okay, wow, this is going to give us way more than we want. But the meaning of a word, a phrase, sentence, or text. Okay? So, when we say, in this case that we've got this heading 1, which as dumb as the content is, right? We're choosing this tag based on the meaning of the content that we're marking up. Okay? We're not saying, oh, let's make this big, or oh, let's make this bold. We're just saying, oh, this thing here is a heading 1 tag. When we say this is a paragraph tag, we're saying semantically, this is a paragraph. Okay? So we have headings, we have paragraphs, and then the other sort of molecular unit of meaning we have are lists. They come in 2 flavors. UL, which means unordered list. Okay? So we could do something like colors, red and blue and yellow. Throw it off. Okay? Right? It really doesn't matter what order these things in are, right? The list would have the same exact meaning if it were yellow, red, blue, red, right? They're unordered. There's no semantic order to them. Versus the ordered list, right? And where would we use something like an ordered list versus unordered? Directions. Okay, directions, yeah, right? 1, get job, get paid, Gatorade, buy nachos, right? That order matters. You cannot buy nachos until you've gotten paid. You cannot get paid until you get a job. 1, 2, 3, okay? And of course, if we look at this in the browser, we'll see that by default, let's fire up our little web server here. It looks like I've got 2 instances running, because now it's popping me over to localhost 8081. Okay? Okay? Now, there are dots here. That is purely the decision of the browser to make that. In fact, if I go to my web developer, I can say disable browser default styles, and this is what we have. So there is no visual property to HTML whatsoever. There are only visual defaults that every single browser imposes upon you. When we get to writing in CSS, we're actually going to start by using some reset style sheets that change all of your HTML back to this. No spacing, no font sizing, no bold, no nothing. Okay? Just give us text. Okay? So again, we're choosing these things not based on how they look. We're choosing them based on their semantics. We're choosing them based on the meaning of the concept that we're marking up. I submit to you, of course that's a fancy word for I am arguing, that pretty much every piece of content that you write in any web page, in any web site, in any web application ultimately becomes either a heading, a paragraph, or a list. Because pretty much everything that human beings write, even user interfaces, are headings, paragraphs, or lists. Right? We want to write navigation for a website. Okay, so we've got this heading. Let's change this up a little bit. Well, we'll put it down here. Okay, so I'm going to put in a nav tag. Ooh, this is one of the first fancy introduced in HTML5 tags. Everybody got this so far? Can I erase this? You can always review the tape later. This is not the last time I will talk about these 3 things, right? So headings. Let me just, okay, so here we have our block level tags. Okay, so we have heading 1 through, what's the lowest level heading we have? 6, thank you. I once had a web design student who just kept adding a number every time they wrote a heading on a page, and they got to like H22. It's not how they work, okay? It's not valid HTML anymore, and most browsers won't even know how to apply styling to anything beyond H6, right? But the way we use these things is very similar to an outline that we would write for a paper. Right? So we have one, I recommend using only one heading 1 on the entire page. It's semantically significant. Browsers like Google pay close attention to what is in that primary heading 1. So then my major headings for the page I will do as H2s. Okay? One major heading, two major heading. The second one has another minor area, so then I go down to an H3. Then I'm back to H2 for the rest of the page. Okay? So it's an outline like that. Again, we're saying page heading, major heading with a minor heading that splits it up because it's such a long section. Then we're back to two more major headings before the page is done. Okay. Yes, Jack. It's only levels of semantics. So for example, if we look at our course site on the projects page, okay, if we look at the source here, so I have a heading 1 tag. I've done some fancy panted stuff to it, but the contents of my heading 1 across the entire course site is the name of our course, right? Because that heading is true on all of those pages because that's what it is. If we go down here, we'll see that then I've got H2 and I've got this class of label on it, major projects. So then just filling this thing out. I'm doing ITMD 361 as my heading 1. I use it once per page. Then I've got major projects as my heading 2. Then you'll see the actual individual names of the projects I've got set as H3, right? So major projects gets used once. And then we've got H3 for project 1. When you look at the project descriptions, the project goals, the deliverables, and the requirements, all 4 of those are H4s, right? Then when you finally get down to project 2, then we're back at H3 for project 2, okay? I disciplined myself not to go any deeper than H4 on this page. But if I needed it, then the next thing I would do would be to split up those H4 sections as H5. Okay? Have you ever done, you've done outlines for papers, right? Where you do a big capital 1 and then, what is it, decimal and then lowercase and then like A. It's the same basic idea as an outline you would write for a paper. Okay? Okay. So we have our headings, H1 through H6. We have our paragraph tag, which we use to mark up what? Paragraphs, full stop, okay? Again, P, paragraph, not all-purpose tag. And then the last one that we have are unordered list, ordered list, which must have as children list. All of your content at its deepest level ends up as one of these 3 things: headings, paragraphs, or some form of list. Okay? Now, we have a couple of, did everybody get Raven's information? Okay. We have some global HTML tags that we must use, right? We have HTML, which is our root element, which gets split up into 2 parts, head and body. Okay, so those are our 3 global tags. So in between, I kind of did this the wrong way, but that's okay. In between our globals that we have to use and our block level tags that we pretty much have to use comes another beautiful category of tag. Okay? Now, in the old days, we had but one tag to use here, and it was called div. And people used freaking divs for everything. And what they did is they added class attributes to them, or ID attributes, which actually I can write those in blue. Those attributes are okay. The div tag is not. Okay, so we would add div class navigation or div ID navigation to our div tag. Okay? Those are not semantic. And in fact, if we look at the documentation, specifically if we look at the HTML5 specification, and if we look for the words last resort, yep. There we go. This is actually in the wiki. We can go back and find it, but it says, when no other element is suitable, the div element is used as an element of last resort, meaning we use the div when we have exhausted all other options, okay? So, what are the options that we get to exhaust first? No, span is in the same class as div. Those are phrase tags. I'm not going to cover those until next week, okay? We get article. We get section. We get aside. These are our three tags that we use for content things. Now, these two guys are very similar, articles and sections. But what's weird, like if you think about a newspaper article, right? That's an article. We talk about articles being self-contained chunks of content, which I take to mean if some piece of content is self-contained, that means it's meant to be read front to back, okay? Without stopping. If you look at our course calendar, do you think our whole course calendar is nested inside one giant article tag? Let's hope I didn't. I sure wouldn't do it right now. Yeah. Okay. We have an article class primary, but that's actually a structural thing for the whole course calendar. But then actually every single week of our calendar is set up as an article, because each week is a self-contained thing. You want to see what we're doing Monday, you want to see what we're doing Wednesday, and you want to see what we're going to be reading for that week. Okay? Also, the entire calendar is one huge ordered list. Literally the whole calendar is an ordered list. Each week gets its own list item. Okay? Which is brilliant, right? Because I wrote it. No. Because what is a course calendar? It's a list of days. So let's use a list. And does it matter that August comes before September? Yeah. Does it matter that the 26th comes before the 28th? Yeah. So then let's put that thing in an ordered list. Let's do the whole course calendar as an ordered list. I love pages that you could do just the whole things as lists. Your resume is a list. And you could probably make the argument that it's an ordered list, right? You have your vision goal or whatever they call that thing, and then you've got your education or you've got your work experience, right? There's a specific order to that thing, okay? So when we talk about article semantics, we're talking about a piece of content that is self-contained. All right, let's see what I did over on the projects page. Okay, so for the projects in this class, rather than having that all as an article, I have the whole page wrapped as a section, which then each individual project is set up as an article. So this is the weird thing about sections, is that you can split an article up into multiple sections, or you can have a section and set it up as multiple articles. Okay? It all comes down to this idea of something being self-contained or not. If it's not self-contained, then it probably gets put into a section. If it's a really long article, then you can break it up into sections. If that makes no sense to you, if you know about newspapers, right? Anybody ever seen one of those? Right? What do we call the part of the newspaper where all the sports stories are contained? The sports section, right? The sports section, I mean, if you're really hardcore into it, you'll read that weird motocross story on page 9 or something like that. But most of the time, you have all of the sports section, and then you read particular articles within that section. Okay? Okay, so we have article, we have section, we have rules about these two things, semantic rules. If I try to, let's just do this. If I say, okay, I started writing that nav element and we never got done with it. That's okay, we'll just leave it there. This is going to be the worst commit ever. So let's say this is an article, my favorite colors and my plans for getting nachos, right? Someone would read this front to back. So if I put an article tag around this, where did you go, article? You come back in here. Okay, 2 levels of indent. I'm going to just get rid of this nav for a second. So I'm going to go to the validator with this, right? Is this well-formed HTML? The new stuff I added. Article opens, UL opens. We have some list items. We close UL. We open OL. We open list items. We close it. We close it. Well-formed? Yes. Let's find out if this is valid. We go to validator.w3.org. We'll do our direct input again. We will check this. And, oh boy. Warning. Article lacks heading. Consider using H2 through H6 elements to add identifying headings to all articles. So, one of the things that we expect for valid HTML is that every article, and we get the same thing if we did this with section. Aside, I don't think it enforces an article on that. We can test it. But we have to make sure that the first element inside of those things is a heading. Okay? Why? Because semantically, we expect to break up these sections as different headings. Okay? And again, see how it's saying use H2 through H6? This is not just some weird stally gospel where I'm like, use heading 1 once on the page. Even the W3C is like, use heading 1 once, and then for everything else, drop in H2 through H6.
So would it complain to use heading 1 more than once in the validator?
I think it would, but let's find out. We'll just put in this heading 1. There, W3C. You happy? Right? Okay, so we drop this back in. Check it again. Okay. Consider using the H1 element as a top-level heading element only. All H1 elements are treated as top-level headings by many screen readers and other tools. So again, yes, there is the sort of academic, theoretical, semantic purity, but then there's also what does this heading 1 represent to devices that are not visual, right? So if we've got a screen reader that's reading aloud to somebody. So yeah, it's going to complain at you about that. So now if we change this to an H2, did I get the right one? Oh, that's fine. I can say, oops. Okay, there we go. Now I'm getting my happy little green bar that says no errors or warnings to show. Okay. Okay, so we have article and a section. Then we have this thing called aside, which some people equated erroneously, and here comes some red, to sidebar, right? Which is a visual construct. What's a sidebar? It's some little piece of content that gets usually stuck horizontally off to the side. Okay? A sidebar is a visual creature. An aside is a semantic one. And depending on where you stick this aside, let's read the documentation for it. MDN, oops, where are we at? MDN, aside. Okay?
The HTML aside element represents a section of a document with content connected tangentially to the main content of the document, often presented as a sidebar. Okay? So if we had some related content, right? You think about like Wikipedia, where they have like the quick facts about that celebrity you were trying to figure out cameoed on Game of Thrones. They often have like where they were born, all that stuff. That's a perfect candidate for an aside because it's tangentially related to the main body of the Wikipedia article. Okay? Okay? All right, so here we have an article. The Disney movie The Little Mermaid was first released to theaters in 1989. Okay, and then we have this aside that the movie earned $87 million during its national release. Okay, maybe not the strongest use of the aside in the history of the world, but that's the thing. Now, where we put this aside matters. If it's an aside to a particular article, we stick the aside in the article. If it's an aside that's for the entire website, then we stick that thing outside of an article. There is an aside on our course site. On the main page, at least I think so. Aside, ID links. So those links, right? Those come at the bottom of the calendar. They have nothing to do with the calendar other than that they support tools and other resources that are related to that material tangentially, right? Do we know tangent? Good vocab word. Right? Like literally a mathematical concept, like with a circle, we can say a line is tangent to the circle, right? So tangentially is your $50 grad school adverb, okay? So we have aside, links. Here are important links, starting with an H3. Now, I have a div in there, which actually I think now I can get rid of. I will clean that up. It'll be a commit. I'll brag about it. That was actually some leftovers from when I was doing older kinds of things. I also have a div for the entire page, which I also no longer use. Okay, so if anybody wants to call out my hypocrisy, there's your opportunity. It used to be that you couldn't style the body tag very well. I know people that do div ID go to hell. Like, so if you're gonna like do that in your project, that's a perfect one for me to read when I'm looking at your project. Like, yeah, shut up, I know. Okay, or div ID last resort, something like that. Okay, but I do have that aside, and I think I've actually got me. I'm an aside. I am only tangentially related to the course content here. Right? Now, you could probably make an argument that this could be an article. Right? This is self-contained content here, but because, again, it's just stuck at the bottom of the calendar page, I thought an aside was semantically the place for this to go. Okay? And again, look, heading 3 says instructor, and then all of the information about me. This is just an unordered list. It's not paragraphs. Right? There's my title. There's my email. If I wanted to, I could add classes and IDs and all kinds of other stuff, so we could put little Twitter icons and things like that. But this is just a list of stuff. Yes? Let's look at what it's defined as in HTML 4.01. Well, again, even if we go here, div was originally division, so you could do different divisions in a document. What everybody loved about the div tag, where's the guy with this crazy tag list? All right, let's do this one thing at a time. So let's see div element HTML 4.01. Freaking W3C schools. Okay, here we go. Global structure of an HTML document, 4.01. Well, I actually want to go to the spec rather than just rely on MDN. Okay, so if we look for, grouping elements, the div and span elements. So this is old. This is HTML 4.01. Okay, the div and span elements in conjunction with the ID and class attributes. So you pretty much had to use class and ID with div elements because they had no semantic value. You could add what you could through class or ID. These elements are defined to be content that are inline, which is the span, or block level, the div, but impose no other presentational idioms on the content. Thus, authors may use these elements in conjunction with style sheets, the lang attribute, etc., to tailor HTML for their own needs. So it really was the kind of like catch-all tag. It was the tag that recognized sometimes you've got a bunch of headings, paragraphs, and lists that you need to structure together somehow. Okay? What HTML5 did was to actually say, well, what are these things that we're grouping together? Okay? Our big generics here are article, section, and then slightly less generic is aside. We get a couple of other tags that I absolutely love. When they first came out, I wanted to get down on one knee and propose to them. Header and footer. Okay. Which again, these are semantically driven things. If we look at, let's look at the MDN documentation for header. And again, I go back and forth between MDN and the specification. What I like about the MDN is if we go all the way down to the bottom of this thing, they actually link to both HTML5 and HTML, the living standard, to show you where you can look at the documentation. Okay. So we see here in this brief description, the HTML header element represents a group of introductory or navigational aids. It may contain some heading elements, but also other elements like a logo, a search form, and so on. Right? It's what you expect at the top of the page. But again, we're doing this thing semantically. Course site. Is there a header tag? Boom, yes there is. There's a big fat header tag here. Header ID header. So one of the things that I like to do, and we'll talk about this more next week when we get deeper into class and ID, but for my major, what I like to think of as my landmark elements, like the header that's for the whole page, it gets an ID the same name as itself. Header ID header. If you go down to footer, you'll see footer ID footer. We'll see why later on that's a good idea. I've got my heading 1. I've got my P class tagline, right? This is the quick little summary of the thing. Then I've got my nav tag, which is the other sort of landmark semantic thing. Okay? Nav is used specifically for marking up navigation, but what is navigation? It's just a list of links, no matter how you style it, right? Vertically, horizontally, with buttons, with little pictures of cute cats for different things. It doesn't matter. Structurally, a navigation is nothing more than a list of links, right? The Facebook like bar that has gotten so complex, right? It used to be just like, and now you tap on it and it swipes out and you can do happy face and laughing, crying face and mad face and things like that. If we were marking those things up semantically, we would just use list items, even if eventually they're going to take images or something like that. Their semantics is they are just a list of options. And they don't matter, right? I did UL class now. There's no necessary expectation that you're going to read the calendar first, the other one second, the other one third, right? So we do an unordered list there. I feel like Cooper's yawn is speaking for everybody today. Are you just dying? No, it's Wednesday. It's hump day. Okay? Your mind is just that blown. Okay. Yeah, okay, see, that's the, oh my God! That's what I only got to see, is just everybody in terror. Okay, let's see what else I was going to do today. Okay, we did some semantics and global attributes. We'll do more of that. Semantic patterns, I've got that on the calendar for next week. Let's talk about this htmlLint. Let me just pull this off. There we go. This little project I love so much. It started off actually, I believe, as a student project somewhere, and now they're actually working on it pretty well. It's a Node.js-based linter. Okay, so if you're at home, you've got Node installed on your computer. and you want to start doing things like I've been doing in class, like firing up this little HTTP server. Once you have Node installed, which again, we can check for Node in a couple different ways. We can say which, not mode, Node. It will give us a path to where our Node installation is. Node comes with its own package manager called npm. npm, of course, standing for Node Package Manager. And we can, so if I want to install HTTP server, I can say npm install HTTP server, and I can say -g, which means I want this available globally. Now, on your system, for right now, you'll probably have to put sudo in front of npm to install a package globally. Next week, I'll give you some references for how you can set up a less privileged area for your global packages. Okay? So when I want to do that, it goes and loads everything up for me, and then boom, now I've got HTTP server version 0.10.0. If I want htmllintrc CLI, same basic idea, htmllintrc CLI. Okay, so it's going to grab it, it's going to install it, put it where I need. Boom. Isn't that better? If you've never done this before, then like go to the website and click download and run the little installer. The G means we want to install this in the global space. By default, Node Package Manager wants to install everything wherever you happen to be sitting on the command line. For tools like this, we want to be able to call HTTP server from anywhere on our command line. Same thing with htmllintrc. We want to be able to configure that thing anywhere. Okay? So you've got this thing, and then I'm providing for you an htmllintrc file. What does the RC mean in these files? You'll find RC all over the place. It's not Royal Crown Cola. Right? Bash RC, Zish RC. What does that RC stand for? This is one of those things like you can sit and stare at this stuff for years and you just have to teach and then finally have some Weisenheimer student in the class who's like, Professor Staley, what's RC mean? And then you go, And you go home and you read about it and you're like, oh, that means runtime configuration. Okay? So this is a configuration that is loaded up every time we run the program. So when we run htmllintrc, or htmllint, it reads from this htmllintrc file and enforces certain rules. Okay? So let's, in 7 minutes, yes? This is linked multiple places off the course calendar. It's also in the links. Oh, on the system, you would put this where I put it, which is right here inside the root of my repository. So usually I will have .git and .htmllintrc. Now, you can technically install this lintrc in the root of your home directory. Then it just runs everywhere. The thing is, though, if you're collaborating with other people, this lint or this configuration file really belongs with your project, so you can make sure you're all following the exact same rules, right? Otherwise, you're going to get in a war where somebody's undoing and redoing your work all day long because you're using two different configuration files. So, best practices: anytime you're using a linter, some kind of debugger, or you're using some kind of other programmatic tool, put those configurations in with your repository so you can work anywhere. I mean, that's the general rule of thumb, right? Is that you want to commit to your repository any file that you need to actually do your work. Okay? Not your actual editor and stuff like that, but every file you expect to open there. Okay, so if we look at the contents of this thing, I've put them in alphabetical order that jibes with, let's see, the options. So you can go through and you can actually read all of the different things. I've kept my configuration in alphabetical order so as to not confuse you. So the first thing that opens, and again this is alphabetically, but it is near and dear to my heart, are banned attributes. Attributes that you're not allowed to use in your HTML. I'm not even going to spend that much time on them, but things like align and background and BG color, right? These are all visual attributes. Hold on, you're getting ahead of me. Okay? So there's some attributes that are banned. We'll hit these things in time. Some of the ones that will catch you later on are things like on load and on click. Okay, we're not going to do those. We're going to do purely unobtrusive JavaScript, which means we're going to tool up with event listeners rather than using these attributes. So all this stuff is like the big laundry list of things you should never use. Yep, no height and no width. we're actually going to handle that programmatically as well. Get back out, I can't see you. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah, that tag is not valid HTML anymore, so I don't think it's covered in linter. We could add it if it would make you happier. Okay, there was a marquee tag that used to work in old Netscape that would send text scrolling endlessly across the screen. Okay. Okay. Attribute name style, I've made dashes allowable in attributes, specifically in data ones. We'll get to that later. Then a couple of no dupes for attributes and for classes, so you can get away with declaring the same attribute twice, but it makes for messy code, and then you think you fixed something, so these are little stylistic things to help you keep things in check. Doc type first is true, which means that the doc type must be the first line, okay? Technically, you can get away with putting like HTML comments, which we haven't talked about, the syntax. You saw them because I deleted them, right? Comments in HTML opens with open caret, bang, 2 dashes, and then it closes with 2 dashes. Okay? Now, we put this closing caret on basically to make it pretty. But what actually closes the comment is 2 dashes. So if you're like me and you're really verbose in your comments and you like to use 2 dashes to emulate an M dash, you'll have all kinds of horrible problems. So just keep in mind that it's actually these 2 dashes that break the comment. Okay? So we want to make sure the doc type is the very first thing. We do that because there are browsers in the world that will go into quirks mode instead of standards compliance mode in terms of how they render the page if you open up with comments or have a bunch of space or whatever else. Okay? We're going to require that all documents have a title tag. We're going to make sure that you can only put in the head children that are valid, like title, like meta car set, like meta viewport that we'll get to next week. We're going to require that the HTML attribute or the HTML tag has the lang attribute. Okay? Dash style IDs, no duplicate IDs. You're required to put alt text on, or the alt attribute on all image tags. Now, the spec says that you can have an empty alt attribute on image tags that are loading images that are just for decoration. Okay? We will load all decorative images using CSS, not image tags. So anytime you're using image, you should have a non-null alt value. Again, this is all stuff we're going to hit. Here we go. Indent style is spaces. Indent width is 2. So if you have indents in tabs, if you have indents that are an odd number of spaces, like 3 or 7, it'll yell at you. Okay? These things are really fancy pants. End of line style is line feed. Okay, tag bans, I guess we should put marquee in here, but we're going to ban the style tag. We're banning the iframe tag. We're banning the break tag and the horizontal rule tag. Not allowed. What's that? For now, we'll ban it. Okay. Here's our well-formedness. Tag close is true, so tags that open must close. Tag name lowercase. Yep, we're going to do lowercase tag names. Tag names match. That's also true. And then we're always going to self-close. So guess what? This linter configuration file knows how to get you an A on the first project. If your work passes the linter, it's provided you've got semantic tags, you've just earned an A on that project. Okay? So we'll look at using that stuff come next Wednesday. All right? Next Wednesday. Because you can have Monday off. Because you worked so hard this first 2 weeks. It's Labor Day. But that's a teacher joke that never gets old. Oh, you can have the day off. Okay? All right. See you guys Wednesday. Yes, sir.